They say scars are proof that you survived. But for some people, scars become prisons, others never let them leave. Imagine being a soldier running through fire to save lives, only to come home and be mocked for the very wounds you carried. This is the story of a woman who was erased from the records of war, forced into silence, and treated as if she didn't matter. But silence has its limit. When she decided to fight back, she didn't just reclaim her own name. She gave every survivor a reason to stand tall again. Stay with me, follow this journey, and if her courage touches you, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts below. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and buttered toast, but to Caleb Hartman, none of that mattered. He sat in a corner booth, broad shoulders hunched, duffel bag beside him, his fork untouched. 42 years old, hair silvering at the edges, Caleb had grown used to the quiet rhythm of back roads and diners. Yet this morning he froze. It wasn't the noise of cutlery or the chatter of regulars. It wasn't even the loud, arrogant voice of Travis Langdon, the suited man holding court at table 7. What locked Caleb in place was the waitress pouring coffee, her arm moving steadily as though the cruelty around her didn't exist. Her name was Raina Jefferson. She stood with her back straight, sleeves rolled down just far enough to hide the worst of the scars. But when she reached for a napkin, the fabric shifted slightly, and Caleb's breath stopped. Beneath the ruined skin, faint but clear, was a tattoo. A curve of numbers, barely visible, but to him it was unmistakable. It was a mark he had seen in Iraq, a mark carried by a combat medic who had run through fire, who had refused to leave men behind, who had saved lives at the cost of her own body. Her name had been KJ, and KJ had died in Fallujah. At least, that's what they had all believed. Caleb's coffee went cold in his hand as his eyes followed her across the room. He had seen bodies, too many, and he had seen ghosts in his sleep, but never had he seen one pour coffee into a cracked diner mug. Meanwhile, at the center booth, Travis slammed his fist down, making the silverware rattle. His voice rose, harsh and cruel, carrying across the diner. "Look who's here. Freddy Krueger decided to pick up a shift today," he barked, smirking as his companions chuckled. His wingman Elliot Crane added a hollow laugh that always came a beat late, like a bad echo. "Hey, monster," Travis sneered, holding up his mug. "Why don't you top this off? Try not to melt the cup with those crispy hands." The words cut through the room, but Raina did not flinch. She walked to their booth, coffee pot steady in her grip, voice even. "Good morning," she said as though she hadn't heard a thing. "Black, no sugar." For a moment, Travis's grin faltered. He hated it when she didn't react, when his cruelty slipped off her like rain against steel. But he covered it with another smirk, nudging Elliot. "She remembers. Got a fireproof memory," Elliot muttered. Raina moved down the row, pouring for each of them, then turned without a word. Her back was straight, her steps measured. To anyone else, she looked like a woman doing her job. To Caleb, she looked like a soldier maintaining formation under fire. He couldn't tear his eyes away. The scars didn't matter. He had seen worse. What mattered was the tattoo. That ink did not belong to a stranger. That tattoo belonged to the medic who had once dragged bleeding men out of burning wreckage. KJ. Caleb's pulse thundered. He remembered the night raid and the explosion, the way the smoke swallowed everything. No body had been found, only silence and grief. They had carved her name into memory as one of the fallen. Yet here she was, standing 10 feet away, enduring the insults of men who had never known real fire. At table 7, Travis leaned back, enjoying his own performance. "Tell me something, Raina. Did you fall into a meth lab? Or maybe it was a romantic bonfire gone wrong?" The other men laughed, though less enthusiastically now. Some of the diner's patrons shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. They never did. Raina smiled, her expression calm, even gentle. "Neither," she replied softly. "But thank you for your creative theories." The response unsettled Travis. He thrived on fear and humiliation, not grace. He clenched his jaw, eyes narrowing. But before he could find his next insult, Elliot blurted out another cruel guess about a kitchen accident. Raina capped the coffee pot and turned away. "Enjoy your breakfast, gentlemen." She walked toward the counter. That was when Caleb could no longer stay silent. He pushed himself up, his chair scraping against the floor, and stepped into her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice steady, but his chest tight. She looked up at Tayam, meeting his eyes with cool professionalism. For a moment, all the noise in the diner fell away. Caleb saw not just the scars, not just the ink, but the stance. Shoulders squared, weight balanced, hands relaxed yet ready. It was the stance of a soldier who had never stopped standing guard. "Low," Caleb said, his voice low. "Where did you serve?" Raina's eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir, can I help you with something?" "First Infantry Division," he answered. "Big Red 1, Fallujah. We had a medic, KJ. She disappeared during a night raid. Saved 5 men before the Humvee exploded." Raina froze, her gaze locked on him for a second, then another, then a third. "KJ," Caleb whispered, breath catching. "That was you." Her lips parted, and for the first time her voice faltered, a whisper meant only for him. "Have you ever seen someone die?" she asked, "and then pour your coffee years later?" Caleb sank slowly back into his seat, palms flat on the table. His heart pounded. He had not imagined it. She was here, alive. At the other booth, Travis lifted his phone, laughing. "This right here is the burnt waitress who serves us every Tuesday. Check out the crispy skin, boys." Elliot's laughter followed, sharp and empty. But Caleb didn't laugh. He watched Raina, the medic who once ran through fire, now standing silent before a new kind of battlefield. Her war wasn't overseas anymore. It was here, in this diner, against men who mistook cruelty for power. And Caleb knew deep in his bones that he was looking at a soldier preparing for another fight. The campaign hadn't begun yet, but something shifted that morning. Silence cracked, recognition returned, and in the stillness between two veterans, an old war stirred back to life. The diner clock ticked past 9, and the morning crowd settled into a steady hum. Plates clattered, coffee steamed, forks scraped against porcelain. But beneath it all, a tension lingered, sharp and brittle. At table 7, Travis Langdon wasn't finished. He leaned back with one arm stretched across the booth, his phone glowing in the other hand. The little red dot on the screen told Caleb all he needed to know. Travis was recording again. "Hey, Raina," Travis called out, his voice too loud for the small diner. "Come on over here, give us that smile again. My followers love it." Raina paused mid-step, her notepad in hand, her eyes briefly catching Caleb's across the room. No flinch, no crack in her composure. Just that quiet calculation again. She approached slowly, her footsteps unhurried, as if the insults rolling her way were no heavier than crumbs on the floor. "Sir, I'm working," she said evenly, setting down a water glass at the edge of the table. Travis grinned wider, leaning closer to the phone. "Exactly, work that charm, baby. Or should I start tipping based on skin tone?" The words hit the air like shrapnel. The laughter that usually followed was thin this time, uncertain. Even Elliot's chuckle stuttered, collapsing into an awkward cough. A couple at a nearby booth lowered their forks, glancing over, their expressions tight. Caleb's fists clenched on the table. He'd heard enough slurs in his life to recognize the intent behind that one. Raina, however, didn't rush. She walked closer, her fingers pressing into the edge of her notepad until her knuckles whitened. Her voice, when it came, was calm but firm. "Mr. Langdon," she said, her words carrying just enough to be heard across the diner, "if you continue recording me without consent, I'll have to ask you to stop." Travis barked a laugh, throwing his head back. "You'll have to what? You work here. You don't get to tell me anything." From behind the counter, Miguel Torres finally moved. He had been watching, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Now he set down a towel, straightened, and spoke in a low, steady tone that carried like authority. "Texas law says otherwise," Miguel said. Travis's grin faltered. He turned in his seat, frowning. "Excuse me?" "One-party consent for recordings, yes," Miguel continued. "But harassment, that's another story." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The diner had gone still. For a moment, Travis seemed unsure whether to push back. Then he scoffed, waved a hand, and turned back to his phone. "Relax, just having a little fun." Raina didn't answer. She stood there, steady as stone, her gaze flat and unreadable. Then the choking started. It began as a harsh cough from a man across the aisle, late 50s, broad-shouldered, his face suddenly red. His wife gasped, rising from her seat as his hand shot to his throat. "Henry!" she cried. Chairs scraped. Someone shouted. Caleb stood halfway before Raina moved. Fast, efficient, every motion honed by memory. She dropped her notepad, slid behind the choking man, and wrapped her arms around his torso. Her voice was sharp, precise, cutting through the panic. "Sir, can you breathe?" The man shook his head violently, face purpling. "I'm performing the Heimlich," she announced, locking her hands and jerking upward. "1, 2. On the third thrust, a chunk of sausage shot free, clattering onto the floor. The man gasped, sagging against the booth as his wife clutched his arm, sobbing with relief. Applause erupted around the diner, hesitant at first, then growing. Raina eased the man back into his seat, checking his pulse with 2 fingers. Her tone softened. "You're okay now. Just rest. Slow breaths." His wife grabbed her hand. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Raina gave a small nod, then stood, smoothing her apron as though nothing had happened. Across the diner, Travis had lowered his phone. Elliot's camera, too, hung forgotten in his lap. Caleb, though he already knew what she was capable of, still felt his chest tighten with awe. The room shifted. The air changed. Raina was no longer just a waitress with scars. She was authority, competence, survival itself. She turned to Miguel. "I'll comp their meal." Miguel nodded once, his eyes warm with pride. Then she faced the booth of men who had tormented her for months. Her voice was crisp, her expression unreadable. "Gentlemen," she said, "do you still require anything else?" For once, Travis had no answer. His lips parted, but the words never came. Raina gave them a thin smile. "Didn't think so." She walked away. Caleb rose from his seat, intercepting her near the counter. His voice was low, respectful. "That was textbook," he murmured. "Clinical. Perfect form." Raina glanced at him, one brow lifting just slightly. 3 tours. You don't forget." Caleb hesitated, then they said it outright. "You were KJ." Her gaze flickered, steady and sharp. "Still am," she replied, almost under her breath, though not many know it. He leaned closer, lowering his voice further. "Why didn't you say anything all this time?" Her eyes softened, but only a fraction. Would they have listened? The silence between them was answer enough. Caleb knew they wouldn't have. He had seen too many like her erased, too many names swallowed by paperwork, too many stories dismissed as exaggerations. "You died," he whispered finally. Raina looked at him, really looked at him. "I disappeared. The fire took everything. My ID, my papers, my proof. All I had left were scars." Caleb swallowed hard, his throat tight. He remembered her running into that smoke, the fire swallowing her figure. He remembered believing she'd been lost forever. Now here she was, standing in front of him, scarred but unbroken. Miguel approached quietly, glancing between them. "Everything okay here?" Raina gave a short nod. "For now." Miguel narrowed his eyes at Caleb. "You're not with them, are you?" "God, no," Caleb replied quickly. "Good," Miguel said, his voice flat, "because I like my floorboards blood-free." Raina almost smiled at that, almost. Then Travis's voice cut across the diner again, brittle and defiant. "You know what this place needs? New waitresses, ones without Frankenstein arms." The laughter didn't come this time. The diner turned on him, silent, unimpressed. Raina took a breath, calm as ever. "Back to work," she murmured, stepping away. Caleb leaned after her. "They won't stop." "I know. So what's the play?" Her eyes flicked over her shoulder, cool and certain. "You'll see." And with that, she walked straight back into the storm, not as a victim, but as the strategist she had always been. Caleb sat back, watching her, realizing something. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was the opening move in a war she intended to win. The diner's rhythm slowly returned, though something had shifted. Conversations hummed again. Plates clattered, but the air was different. Less laughter, more awareness. Travis sat at his booth sulking, his phone idle on the table. Elliot mumbling weak jokes that fell flat. Caleb leaned against the counter, eyes following Raina. She moved with the same deliberate grace she had shown during the choking incident. Not hurried, not flustered, calculating. He had seen that look before, back in Mosul, when soldiers studied terrain maps, planning how to move without triggering a trap. Then it happened. As she passed by the counter, her hand brushed against its edge, fingers lingering just long enough. Not an accident, a signal. "Meet me out back." Caleb understood immediately. He dropped some bills beside his empty cup, grabbed his duffel, and slipped quietly out the front door. The September air hit cool against his skin as he circled into the alley behind the diner. It was narrow, shadowed by cracked brick walls and a rusted dumpster. A strip of sky showed above, pale blue cut by wires. He crossed his arms, back against the wall, and waited. Moments later, Raina emerged, tying her apron tighter before untying it completely. She pushed her sleeves up, revealing the raw story her body carried. Burn scars running from wrist to elbow, melted patterns of pain that no one could erase. And beneath the scars, faint but defiant, the tattoo still survived. The unit code. Caleb's breath caught. "You still remember the code?" he asked softly. Her eyes flicked up, steady. "Muscle memory. It's still there. Part of me." He shook his head slowly. "All of you." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The wind whispered down the alley, carrying the faint smell of grease and coffee from the diner. "I thought you were dead," Caleb admitted. His voice cracked, heavy with years of believing it. "After Fallujah, we heard you didn't make it out. No body, no contact." "I was supposed to be," Raina replied flatly. He studied her face. Tired, lined with years, but not broken. "I never forgot you," he said. "Not once, y'all." Raina leaned back against the wall, her arms folded across her chest. When the fire hit, everything was gone. No ID survived the explosion. I couldn't talk for weeks. Third-degree burns, memory gaps. The hospital listed me as Jane Doe. By the time the VA processed me, I was just another faceless vet. No discharge file, no rank, no records. Invisible. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You could have reached out. Someone would have believed you." Her eyes darkened. "Who? With what proof? All I had was this." She tapped the faded tattoo. "And even that barely scans anymore." He stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. "You ran into a hot zone to save 6 men. 3 of them lived. You were a hero before the scars. You're still one now." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Heroes don't serve coffee to men who mock them." "Maybe not," Caleb countered, "but soldiers do worse when the war comes home." Raina studied him for a long beat, then her voice dropped. "So why are you here, Caleb?" "Really?" He swallowed. "I came for coffee. I stayed because of you, and because those bastards inside don't know who they're messing with." Her eyes narrowed, assessing. "You still serve?" "Retired 2 years ago, did some contracting. Now I run programs for vets, ones the system discarded, like you." "I'm not discarded," she corrected. "Just misfiled." "Same damn thing." She sighed, the weight of it heavy. "You think this is winnable?" Caleb frowned. "What do you mean?" "You've been watching me," she said simply. "I've been fighting for 6 months, gathering intel, recording every word they say. How did you know?" His mouth twitched. "I know a recon mind when I see one. You look at them the way we looked at terrain maps." For the first time, a dry chuckle escaped her. "Langdon and Crane Consulting, Tuesdays. Same booth, same routine. They think I'm too broken to understand. But I have every word saved, every slur, every illegal scheme, every plan to fire people like me. I've got the whole picture now." Caleb stepped closer. "And now you've got a witness. 2 of us." Raina tilted her head. "Why? Why help me?" His answer was steady. "Because when I thought you were gone, I thought I'd lost one of the bravest people I'd ever known. Turns out you're still here, still fighting. That means I fight with you." Her eyes sharpened, a soldier's gaze. "This isn't a battlefield, Caleb. It's an ambush. One wrong move, and I become the angry black woman who couldn't take a joke. They win. Then we don't let them twist it," Caleb said. "Binan? We document, we expose." For the first time, Raina's expression softened, almost approving. "You said you run support programs. How many contacts do you have?" "Civil rights lawyers, Press outlets, a few nonprofits, enough. And one journalist who owes me a favor. She nodded slowly. Good, because I don't want sparks, I want detonation. Caleb's eyes lit with something between pride and resolve. Then let's load the warhead. Back inside, laughter flickered half-heartedly from Travis's booth, but the power had shifted. In the alley, two veterans stood side by side. No longer ghosts, no longer alone. The campaign had begun, not with noise, not with violence, but with silence sharpened into strategy. Raina pulled her sleeves back down, tied her apron, and glanced toward the diner door. Let's go back, she said. They think I'm broken. Let's prove them wrong. Caleb nodded, falling into step beside her. The war they were about to wage wouldn't be fought with rifles or grenades. It would be fought with truth, patience, and the kind of precision only survivors knew how to wield. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt the same surge he had felt in combat. Only this time, the battlefield was a diner, and the soldier at his side was the medic they once thought dead. Tuesday bled into evening, and the diner's neon sign flickered against the dark. The laughter from Table 7 had faded into muttering, the bravado dimming. Travis Langdon still strutted in his own mind, but the room no longer bent toward him. Something had shifted. Raina moved between tables, collecting plates, her motions precise. Every step was deliberate, as though she were walking a battlefield again, scanning terrain for traps. Caleb stayed near the counter, his duffel tucked beneath his seat, pretending to sip at lukewarm coffee, but never taking his eyes off her. She caught his glance once, just enough for him to read it. Patience. Timing. Not yet. Later, when the diner finally emptied and the bell above the door stilled, Raina untied her apron and slid into a booth across from Caleb. Miguel Torres, the manager, locked the front door but didn't pry. He knew better than to intrude when Raina wore that soldier's stillness. She set a small recorder on the table between them. Not a phone, a recorder. Old, reliable, the kind you could trust to capture words clean. She pressed play. Travis's voice filled the quiet diner, grainy but unmistakable. Don't say race, he bragged on the recording. Say cultural mismatch. Say poor synergy, productivity gaps. Same outcome, fewer lawsuits. Elliot's laugh followed, hollow and sharp. Caleb felt his chest tighten. He had heard battlefield cruelty. This was different, quieter but just as lethal. Words that destroyed lives without leaving visible wounds. Raina clicked stop. I have 6 months of this, she said flatly. Every Tuesday, every insult, every slip, every scheme. They thought I was just a waitress, too burnt, too dumb, too broken to understand, but I understood, and I saved it all. Caleb leaned back, his eyes narrowing. You weren't just surviving, you were gathering. Her lips curved, but it wasn't quite a smile. I don't fight wars I can't win, so I built the case first. He studied her. And what's the plan? She leaned forward, voice low but steady. Exposure. I'm done letting them own the narrative. They want to humiliate me in public? Fine. We'll make it public, but on my terms. Caleb nodded. Then we need to organize this, categorize everything, make it undeniable. Raina reached under the seat and pulled out a worn folder. Inside were transcripts, neatly labeled. Harassment, retaliation, discriminatory intent, client names. Each page bore her meticulous handwriting, steady and exact like field notes. Caleb skimmed, his soldier's mind falling easily into the rhythm of intel review. You've built a dossier. Dossiers don't get seen, she replied. They get buried. I want detonation, not paperwork. Then we'll need allies, Caleb said. Civil rights lawyers, advocacy groups, and press. But not mainstream, too many filters, too much spin. We need someone who'll hit truth first. Raina tilted her head. You have someone in mind? He nodded. Lena Marquez, independent journalist. I saved her once, Syria, joint op. She owes me. More importantly, she still works for truth, not clicks. For the first time that night, something like hope flickered across Raina's face. You trust her? With my life, Caleb said simply. Then with mine too, Raina replied. The plan took shape on the sticky diner table, amid coffee rings and faint grease stains. Caleb sorted through the recordings, helping her map them onto a timeline, from casual mockery to outright admissions of discrimination. Together, they built an executive summary, crisp and sharp, a weapon forged from silence. When the last file was organized, Raina slid a flash drive across the table. 5 copies, she said. One for a lawyer, one for a union contact, one for an anonymous whistleblower portal, one for a nonprofit watchdog, and one for Lena. Caleb picked it up, weighing the small object in his palm. Enough redundancy to survive any retaliation. That's the point, Raina said. She leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her features, but her eyes were alive, burning with the old fire Caleb remembered from Iraq. You know what happens next, he said. She nodded. The wait, the part no one sees, the part that matters most. Caleb's voice was low, certain. They won't see it coming. Raina gave a short, sharp laugh. That's because they don't look at me long enough to imagine I could fight back. Her gaze sharpened, cutting into the dim light of the diner. But I'm done hiding. Next Tuesday, we set it off. Caleb leaned forward, his palm pressing flat against the table between them. Then let's make it count. The clock ticked. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Outside, the street lay empty, shadows pooling in corners. Raina gathered the folders, tucked them under her arm, and rose. Caleb stood beside her, and for the first time, she let the smallest smile touch her lips. Not for him, not for herself, but for the war to come. The battlefield wasn't sand and smoke this time. It was lies, recordings, and the arrogance of men who thought no one listened. But Raina Jefferson had listened. She had recorded. And now she was ready to strike. As she reached the diner door, she turned back to Caleb. Her voice was calm, certain. Next Tuesday, Travis Langdon won't just lose control of the room. He'll lose the story. And with that, she stepped into the night, leaving Caleb with a thought he couldn't shake. For years, they had believed she was a ghost. But ghosts didn't fight wars. Soldiers did, and Raina had just chosen her battlefield. Tuesday came dressed in sunlight. The diner opened like it always did, coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, the bell above the door chiming with regulars. But under the surface, something waited. Raina Jefferson felt it in her bones. She tied her apron as if lacing armor, checked the small recorder in her pocket twice, then once more. 6 months of patience had brought her here. Today was not routine. Today was war. Caleb Hartman sat in his usual corner booth, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. His duffel rested at his side, but he wasn't here for travel. He was here as her witness. By 9, Travis Langdon and his entourage entered, loud as always. Travis's suit was brighter than his smile, his arrogance filling the room before his voice did. Elliot Crane trailed behind, smirking, holding his phone at the ready. 2 junior executives followed, eyes dulled by sycophancy. They slid into booth 7, their kingdom of cruelty. There she is, Travis announced, waving his phone. The Tuesday monster, our little tradition. Raina appeared at their side, coffee pot in hand, her face unreadable. Good morning, and she said evenly, pouring without spilling a drop. Travis smirked, burnt and bitter, just like the coffee. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he held his position. This was her battlefield. Across the diner, the bell chimed again. A woman entered, dark hair, steady stride, notebook in hand. She looked like a traveler, maybe a teacher passing through, but Caleb knew better. Lena Marquez slid into a front booth, ordered black coffee, and opened her notebook. No camera crew, no fanfare, just steel behind quiet eyes. Raina poured her cup, and in that brief exchange of gazes, the signal was clear. It was time. Travis leaned back in his booth, voice raised enough to carry. You know, some people just aren't company material. You can smell it on them, dead weight like burnt coffee, huh? Raina refilled his mug, her tone polite, deliberate. Tell me more about your company, Mr. Langdon. Sounds fascinating. Elliot perked up, eager to play along. Oh, Rainey, you'd love it. We streamline, help companies clean house, get rid of legacy problems. Define legacy, Raina said, her voice smooth as silk. You know, Travis said, gesturing with a cup, the ones who don't fit, slow things down, always cry victim, like look around. Would you hire someone like... He stopped just short, smirked, and let the implication hang heavy in the air. Unfortunately for him, Raina didn't flinch. Yes, she replied softly. I do know. Across the diner, Lena's phone was already recording. At 10:03 a.m., the files Raina and Caleb had prepared went live. Audio transcripts, video clips, 6 months of evidence uploaded to a secure site, which I'm sure published in an open letter under Lena's name. The headline spread across the internet within minutes. Veteran Waitress records discriminatory practices at Langdon and Crane Consulting. Inside the diner, phones buzzed one by one. Notifications lit up screens. One of the junior execs frowned, scrolling rapidly. Guys, he muttered, we're tagged in something. Elliot grabbed his phone, his jaw slackened in. She posted it, the whole thing, not just us, contracts, clients, everything. Raina stood calm, coffee pot steady in her hand. Gentlemen, she asked, her voice crisp, can I get you anything else? Perhaps some humility? The words cut deeper than any insult they had thrown at her. Miguel Torres stepped out from behind the counter, arms crossed. Need backup, Raina? She shook her head slightly. They're already surrounded. Caleb rose from his seat, his voice loud enough for the diner to hear. She's not just a waitress. She's a decorated combat medic. 3 tours, Bronze Star, and more moral courage than you'll ever understand. Travis shot to his feet, his face red, his phone forgotten. You're all insane. This is slander. A new voice rang out, calm and certain. No, Mr. Langdon, it's evidence. Lena Marquez stood, notebook in hand, her press badge clipped to her pocket. And I suggest you call your lawyer. Travis's confidence drained. He stammered, his bravado slipping through his fingers. We'll sue. We'll bury you. Raina tilted her head, her tone almost kind. You'll try. But unlike your business model, truth scales fast. Caleb stepped closer, his presence solid beside her. And now the Department of Labor has it too. The diner was silent, every eye fixed on the spectacle. Regulars lifted phones, cameras recording. The cooks peered through the order window. Even children fell quiet, sensing history in the making. Travis's bravado collapsed completely. He fled, pushing past stunned patrons, his voice breaking as he cursed into his phone. The diner exhaled as one. Raina set the coffee pot down, her hands finally free. She looked at Caleb, at Lena, at Miguel, then out across the room. Her war had never been about rage. It was about timing. And today, she had chosen her battlefield and won. But as the room erupted with whispers, applause, and the glow of phones capturing every second, she did not celebrate. Because Raina Jefferson knew better than anyone. This was only the first battle. The war was far from over. The diner buzzed with aftershocks. Conversations clashed in hurried whispers. Phones lit up with notifications, and news alerts chimed from every corner. Raina Jefferson stood in the center of it all, steady as stone. The silence she had carried for years was gone, replaced by a storm she had unleashed with precision. Travis Langdon had fled, his expensive shoes clicking against the sidewalk as he barked into his phone. Elliot Crane trailed after him, pale and shaken, clutching his briefcase as though it were a shield. Their booth sat abandoned, coffee half drunk, laughter extinguished. Caleb Hartman remained by Raina's side. He had seen artillery fire, IED blasts, the sudden chaos of ambushes. The look in the room now, the hushed awe, the electric uncertainty, felt familiar. A battle had been won, but war was only beginning. Ma'am, a voice asked softly. Raina turned. The man she had saved from choking just days before stood with his wife at his side. His hands trembled as he adjusted his glasses. Thank you for everything. She nodded once, a soldier's acknowledgement. Take care of each other. The bell over the diner door jingled. This time it wasn't Travis returning. 2 men in dark jackets entered, badges flashing. Department of Labor. Ms. Jefferson, one asked, scanning the room. We'd like a word. Miguel Torres stepped forward, jaw set. She's off the clock. It's fine, Miguel, Raina said quietly. She faced the agents head on. Within minutes, she was seated at her booth with them, Caleb nearby like a silent wall of muscle. The agents flipped spin files, her transcripts spread across the table. They weren't here to accuse. They were here to verify. You've been documenting this for how long? One agent asked. 6 months, Raina replied. And you shared with a journalist, a union rep, and a nonprofit watchdog? Correct. The agents exchanged glances. One scribbled notes, the other leaned in. What you've done, it's airtight. It'll trigger an immediate review. Retaliation against you is illegal. Caleb's voice rumbled. Illegal doesn't mean they won't try. The agent nodded grimly. He's right. You should prepare. By afternoon, the story spread nationally. News anchors debated it. Radio stations replayed the recordings. Social media hashtags trended. Hashtag justice served. Hash veteran waitress. Our scars and strength. Veterans from across the state began driving to the diner. Some wore caps embroidered with their units. Others carried folded photos. They ordered coffee, tipped heavy, and stayed long after their meals. A protective presence. One old Marine leaned across the counter to Raina. We remember Fallujah. You ain't have forgotten. Her chest tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. But not all attention was supportive. By the third morning, anonymous emails flooded her inbox. Some carried threats, others mockery. Fraud. Attention seeker. Should have stayed dead. The cruelty burned, but she read each one in silence, her face unmoved. Caleb wasn't silent. He slammed his palm on the counter after reading one message. They're going after you because they're cornered. We need to get you protection. I've lived through worse, Raina murmured. Not like this, he shot back. Overseas, you knew where the fire came from. Here, they'll come from every angle. Media, lawyers, lies. He was right. The smear campaign started almost immediately. On the evening news, Travis appeared with a slick PR team, his voice trembling but rehearsed. This woman, she's been unstable for years. She fabricated these tapes. She's exploiting veterans' sympathy for personal gain. Clips of Raina working at the diner flashed on screen, twisted into a mockery of professionalism. Look at her. Does she look like a hero to you? Travis sneered into the camera. Caleb killed the volume with the remote, his jaw clenched. Bastard. Raina sat in the booth across from him, her arms folded, gaze unshaken. Let him talk. Every word he says now, he says to the world, and the world is watching. The threats escalated. A rock shattered the diner's front window one night, a note tied to it. Shut up or burn again. Miguel wanted to call the police. Caleb wanted to stand guard with his old service rifle. Raina, however, taped the note to the wall behind the counter. Let them see, she said. I don't scare easy. Still, Caleb didn't let her walk alone. He accompanied her home, trailed behind when she ran errands, and sat in the diner during her shifts. To anyone watching, he looked like a quiet veteran passing time. In truth, he was her shield. Meanwhile, Lena Marquez amplified the story. She went live, broadcasting the recordings alongside interviews with veterans who had served with Raina. Men with lined faces and steady voices said her name, confirmed her heroism, and broke the narrative Travis tried to spin. She pulled me out of fire, one testified. If she says something happened, believe her. She doesn't lie. The video hit millions of views in days, translated into multiple languages. International papers picked up the story. What began in a Texas diner now rippled across borders. But with the spotlight came danger. Caleb noticed a car idling across the street one night, headlights off. Another time, someone followed them from the diner to Raina's small apartment, disappearing when he turned to confront them. This isn't just smear, Caleb warned. They're escalating. Raina's answer was quiet but firm. Then so will we. She stood taller than he had seen in years, scars catching the light, no longer a mark of shame but of survival. Travis Langdon thought he had silenced her with ridicule. Instead, he had awakened her. And the woman who once carried men out of fire now carried a movement. But Caleb knew movements drew enemies. And as the threats sharpened, he realized the next battle wouldn't just be fought in courtrooms or online. It would be fought face to face against men desperate to protect the empire she was tearing down. The diner had become more than a place for breakfast. In the weeks since Raina Jefferson's recordings went public, it had turned into a gathering point. Veterans in worn jackets, young families offering thanks, strangers stopping by just to sit near her and order coffee. The bell above the door no longer rang with indifference, it rang with solidarity. But not everyone came in peace. One Thursday morning, the door burst open with unusual force. Travis Langdon stormed inside, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot with fury. Behind him trailed a cameraman and a woman holding a boom mic, the logo of a tabloid news channel bright on their equipment. Raina, standing behind the counter with a coffee pot in hand, did not flinch. She set the pot down, wiped her palms on her apron, and faced them as though she had been expecting this. Caleb Hartman, seated in his corner booth as always, slid one hand beneath the table where his duffel rested, his body taut and ready. "Tension, everyone," Travis bellowed, spreading his arms. "The fraud has been exposed. Today, we reveal the truth." The cameraman swung the lens toward Raina. The woman with the mic stepped forward, voice shrill. "Ms. Jefferson, critics claim your scars are staged, your stories exaggerated, your tapes manipulated. How do you respond?" A murmur rippled through the diner. Some patrons stiffened in their seats. Others pulled out their phones to record. Veterans at the back exchanged grim glances, rising slowly like soldiers hearing the call to arms. Raina didn't rush. She reached up, untied the knot of her apron, and let it fall onto the counter. Her hands trembled slightly, but not with fear. She raised her arms, sleeves sliding back, scars gleaming raw in the morning light. "You think these are sad?" she asked quietly, voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The cameraman zoomed in, unflinching. Travis sneered, seizing the moment. "Makeup, prosthetics, Hollywood tricks. She's been fooling you all." But before his words could take root, a voice rose from the back of the diner. Gravelly, strong. "That woman saved my life." A man in his 60s stepped forward, his Marine Corps cap in his hand. His left leg dragged slightly, the limp of an old battlefield injury. He looked straight into the camera. "Fallujah, 2004. I was bleeding out in a Humvee. She carried me through fire when everyone else thought it was over." Another voice joined. "Mosul, 2005. She patched me up under mortar fire." One by one, veterans rose from their seats. Each spoke with the weight of lived memory, their testimonies weaving a wall of truth around her. "She's no fraud. She's a medic, the best. If she says it happened, it happened." Travis's face paled, his composure crumbling as the room turned against him. The cameraman hesitated, torn between his employer's orders and the undeniable force of the testimonies flooding the air. Raina stepped forward, her voice steady now, carried by the strength around her. "I earned every scar saving men who thought their lives were over. I didn't fake them. I lived through them. And if that makes you uncomfortable, Mr. Langdon, then maybe it's because you've never risked anything for anyone but yourself." The diner erupted in applause. Phones caught every word, every scar, every veteran standing shoulder to shoulder with her. Travis sputtered, his voice breaking. This is staged. You're all in on it." He shoved past the cameraman, storming toward the door. His shoes squealed against the tile, his voice high with desperation. "You'll regret this, Jefferson. You'll regret it." The door slammed behind him, leaving the camera crew stranded and confused. The woman with the mic lowered it slowly, her eyes wide. "This wasn't what we were told," she whispered. The cameraman turned the lens toward Raina one last time. "Do you want to say anything before we go?" She looked straight into the camera. "Yes, to every veteran who's been erased, every worker discarded, every survivor silenced. Your scars don't make you weak. They make you undeniable. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The footage streamed online within hours. Lena Marquez clipped it, subtitled it, and within days it reached millions. Undeniable trended worldwide. The diner became more than a sanctuary, it became a fortress. Veterans volunteered shifts to watch the door. Miguel reinforced the windows after the rock attack. Local families brought meals saying, "You saved us. Now let us save you." Caleb watched it all, pride swelling in his chest. Raina had gone from silence to defiance, and now to leadership. She wasn't just fighting back, she was commanding the field. Late that night, Lena showed her the numbers on a tablet. "Raina, your testimony has been translated into 15 languages. Veterans in Germany, Korea, South Africa, they're all sharing it. You've become the face of something bigger than you." Raina sat back, her fingers curled around a coffee mug, her gaze distant but fierce. I never wanted to be a face. I just wanted them to stop. They won't stop, Caleb said from across the booth. Not until you finish this. She looked at him, her scars catching the neon glow from the diner sign. For years, she had survived in silence. But now, silence was no longer enough. Travis Langdon had tried to bury her. Instead, he had made her a banner. And as she stared out into the night, the hum of cars on the street, the flicker of neon on glass, she realized something that sent a shiver down her spine. This was no longer about survival. This was a movement, and she was its reluctant leader. The diner, once known for pancakes and endless coffee, had transformed. What was once a stop for truckers and office workers had become a destination. By morning, a line formed outside the door, not just for food, but for solidarity. Veterans in uniform jackets, young activists with cameras, families holding signs, all came to sit, to order, to share a table in the place now called the Honor Diner. Raina Jefferson still worked the counter, still poured coffee, but the rhythm had changed. Every cup she set down carried more than caffeine. It carried proof that survival was not silence. Her scars, once mocked, now glowed in the light as emblems of resilience. One afternoon, Caleb Hartman leaned against the wall near the register, watching. His veteran's cap shaded his eyes, but his expression was clear. Pride. He had seen movements spark before, but never like this. Not from fire and ashes. Not from someone who was supposed to be gone. Raina's plan had grown beyond her. It began with testimonies. With Lena Marquez's guidance, Raina and Caleb traveled to a nonprofit meeting for veterans. The room was filled with men and women carrying invisible wounds, PTSD, unemployment, isolation. Many had been discarded by the very companies that once promised them opportunity. When Raina took the microphone, she didn't raise her voice. She spoke softly, steadily, letting silence punctuate each word. I disappeared once, she said. Fire took my body. Paperwork took my name. For years, I poured coffee while men laughed at the proof etched into my skin. But I wasn't just surviving, I was listening, recording, waiting, and when the time came, I spoke. She paused, scanning the room. Faces leaned closer. Some wiped their eyes. I am not the story, she continued. I am a symptom. If you've been silenced, if you've been erased, know this, you are not alone. Your scars, visible or not, are not weakness. They are your testimony. And when we speak together, we are undeniable. The applause rolled like thunder. Some veterans stood, saluting her not as a waitress, not even as just a medic, but as a leader. The impact spread faster than anyone predicted. Whistleblowers from Langdon and Crane's firm began leaking files, internal memos, emails, lists of workers targeted for cultural mismatch. Each document reinforced Raina's recordings, widening the cracks in the empire Travis Langdon had built. Within weeks, contracts collapsed. Clients canceled deals. Elliot Crane, long Travis's shadow, resigned in a quiet press release that made headlines anyway. The firm bled reputation, money, and power. And yet, Raina did not celebrate. She remained steady, grounded, serving coffee as she always had. But the diner itself began to change around her. It started with one frame photograph. A veteran brought in a faded picture of his squad and asked if it could hang on the wall. Miguel found a spot by the door. Then another veteran brought a medal, mounted in a small box. Soon the walls filled. Portraits, ribbons, dog tags, folded letters from home. The honor wall was born. It stretched across the diner, growing each week. Families added keepsakes of loved ones lost. Survivors placed their own symbols, patches, boots, helmets scarred from war. The wall was no longer decoration. It was memory, legacy, and resistance all at once. Raina walked past it each morning, running her hand across the frames. She didn't need to say what it meant. The honor wall spoke for itself. No one here would be erased again. Media swarmed, of course. National outlets filmed the diner, interviewing patrons who had come from across the country just to sip coffee and sit beneath the wall. International papers ran features. The waitress who defied silence, from scars to strength, the diner that became a fortress. But what struck Raina most weren't the cameras. It was the quiet moments. A young girl with a bandaged arm sat at the counter one morning, her mother explaining she had been burned in a house fire. She looked at Raina with wide eyes and whispered, "You look like me." Raina leaned down, her voice gentle. "No, sweetheart, you look like you, and you're beautiful." The girl smiled for the first time in weeks. That night, Caleb sat across from her, his voice low. "You realize what's happening, don't you? You're not just telling your story anymore. You're carrying theirs." Raina stared into her coffee, the steam curling upward like memory. "I never wanted to be a leader." "Neither do the best ones," Caleb replied. "That's why people follow them." The diner became a hub for more than meals. Workshops were held in the back booth, resume training, therapy sessions, small circles of veterans talking through trauma. Raina never claimed titles, never stood above anyone, but her presence was enough to anchor the space. Through it all, Caleb stood by her side, organizing logistics, calling in favors, ensuring safety when threats still loomed. He didn't speak much during her moments in the spotlight. He didn't need to. His loyalty was a shield she didn't have to ask for. Late one evening, when the crowd had thinned and the honor wall glowed softly under dim lights, Lena Marquez showed Raina a message on her tablet. "It's spreading," Lena said. "Europe, Asia, Africa, veterans, survivors, workers. They're using your words as a rallying cry. This is more than a diner story now." Raina closed her eyes briefly, the weight heavy but steady on her shoulders. "Then we keep going." Outside, the neon sign buzzed, its light casting long shadows onto the street. Inside, the honor wall stretched taller, broader, more powerful with each passing day. What began as silence in a small diner had become something larger, a movement stitched together by scars, memory, and the quiet defiance of those who refused to disappear. Raina Jefferson had once been mocked as a ghost. Now she was something far stronger, a beacon. And though she never asked for the role, she began to understand it. Her mission was no longer just to survive. It was to lead others out of the fire. The invitation arrived in a plain envelope, embossed with the seal of the United States Senate. Miguel slid it across the counter while Raina Jefferson was refilling coffee for a trucker. "You've been summoned," Miguel said softly. Raina set the pot down, her fingers brushing the envelope. The words printed inside made her chest tighten. Subcommittee hearing on veteran discrimination and workplace retaliation. For days afterward, the diner buzzed with it. Regulars congratulated her. Veterans clapped her on the back. Reporters camped outside hoping for a quote. But when the excitement faded, only the weight remained. "It's not just your story anymore," Caleb told her one night, sitting across from her in the booth by the honor wall. "You'll be carrying thousands of voices with you." Raina nodded slowly, her scars glowing faintly in the neon light. "Then I'll carry them steady." Washington, D.C., the marble steps of the Capitol gleamed beneath the morning sun. Cameras lined the walkways, reporters shouted questions, and flashbulbs burst like small explosions. Raina climbed the steps slowly, dressed in a plain navy suit that did nothing to hide her scars. She had refused makeup, refused sleeves long enough to cover her arms. Today was about truth, and truth did not hide. Caleb walked beside her, not in uniform but in quiet solidarity, his presence as grounding as sandbags against a flood. Inside the chamber, senators shuffled papers and murmured to aides. Rows of cameras pointed forward. The room smelled of polished wood and tension. When her name was called, Ms. Raina Jefferson, former combat medic, survivor, advocate, she rose. Her steps echoed softly against the floor as she approached the microphone. She did not clear her throat. She did not fidget. She simply began. "Good morning, Senators. My name is Raina Jefferson. I served 3 tours as a combat medic with the United States Army. I was declared dead in Fallujah. But I survived. I survived fire, bureaucracy, and silence." The chamber hushed. Even the aides stopped shuffling. "For years, I worked as a waitress, scarred, nameless, erased. I poured coffee for men who mocked me, recorded me, humiliated me. They thought I was invisible. But I listened. And when I spoke with proof." She lifted a folder and laid it on the table. Inside were transcripts, memos, recordings, evidence of discriminatory practices not just from Langdon and Crane, but from companies across the country that had adopted similar coded language. "You won't find the word race," she said. You won't find the word gender or veteran in these documents. What you will find are codes, cultural mismatch, poor synergy, unfit for brand image, phrases designed to erase people quietly while protecting profit loudly. One senator leaned forward. Ms. Jefferson, are you suggesting this is a systemic issue? Raina's gaze didn't waver. I'm not suggesting, I'm stating I lived it, and so did thousands of others. Another senator shifted, skeptical. But surely not all companies. Senator, Raina cut in gently, if you've ever sat in a diner and watched a man laugh while firing someone with a smile, you'd know it doesn't take all companies. It only takes enough. And it only takes silence to keep it going. The words hung heavy. Silence filled the chamber, not of dismissal, but of reckoning. She steadied her breath, her voice carrying softer now, almost tender. I'm not here because I want sympathy. I'm here because I don't want another soldier, another worker, another survivor to disappear the way I did. I am not the story. I am a symptom. And symptoms warn us of deeper disease. Her final words rang with quiet force. Do not erase us. Do not let our scars become our silence. Because if you do, then you erase this nation's promise to those who served it. When she finished, the chamber erupted, not in applause because hearings forbade it, but in the thunder of camera shutters, the hum of voices, the electric sense that something irreversible had just been said. Outside, the response was immediate. News outlets played clips of her testimony on loop. Her line, I am not the story, I am a symptom, became a headline, a banner, a hashtag. Crowds gathered on the Capitol steps holding signs. Start by believing us. Veterans stood at attention, saluting as she exited the building. Families wept. Strangers reached out. Children clutched handmade posters that read, Scars are strength. Caleb walked beside her through the sea of cameras. Steady and unyielding. He whispered as they reached the car, You didn't just testify. You detonated. Raina sat back in the seat, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She only breathed, steady and slow. Then let the shockwave carry. That night, the diner was fuller than ever. Veterans crowded the booths, activists filled the counter, families left flowers beneath the honor wall. The neon sign buzzed above them, casting blue light onto the faces of people who, for the first time, felt seen. And Raina Jefferson, once a ghost, once mocked as nothing more than scars, now stood as a voice that even senators could not silence. Travis Langdon once strode through glass towers with the swagger of a man untouchable. He was the client pleaser, the corporate whisperer, the executive with answers. But after Raina Jefferson's testimony before the Senate, his empire cracked like glass under pressure. It began with silence. Phone calls went unanswered. Meetings were canceled. Contracts dissolved overnight. His name, once whispered in boardrooms with respect, now trended on social media alongside hashtags, #Fraud Langdon, #Scars Tell Truth, #Undeniable. Travis tried to fight back. He appeared on camera one evening, the backdrop of his home office carefully staged. Bookshelves, family photos, soft lighting. His voice was shaky, rehearsed, but he forced a smile. I want to address the accusations, he said. First, I apologize if anyone felt disrespected by my words. Second, I am stepping down from Langdon and Crane Consulting effective immediately. I am also donating my shares to veteran charities as a gesture of goodwill. The words fell flat. The public wasn't moved. His apology was dissected online. His resignation branded as cowardice. His donation called damage control. Raina didn't watch the video live. She was at the diner refilling coffee cups, her back to the mounted TV. But Caleb watched. His jaw tightened as he muttered, too little, too late. Veterans who sat at the counter nodded in agreement. One leaned over and said, You can't buy back honor with charity checks. The truth spread faster than Travis's staged remorse. Schools began using Raina's testimony in civics classes. High school students wrote essays titled Scars as Strength and The Waitress Who Changed Policy. Teachers read them aloud, voices breaking as teenagers spoke about dignity, survival, and truth. One afternoon, Miguel brought a stack of letters into the diner, bundled with string. Mail for you, he told Raina. She untied the bundle, hands trembling as she read. Dozens of essays spilled across the counter, handwritten words, typed paragraphs, drawings of medals and soldiers. You saved people in war, one student wrote. Now you save us with your courage. Another. Your scars are proof that heroes exist outside comic books. Raina pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wet. She turned away from the counter for a moment, needing space to breathe. Caleb quietly slid into the booth beside her, his voice low. Let it in, he said gently. You've carried fire long enough. Let yourself carry this too. She nodded, blinking back tears. For the first time in years, she cried openly, not from pain, but from recognition. That winter, a film crew set up in the diner. Lena Marquez had secured funding for a docuseries titled The Weight We Carry. Cameras captured the clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversations, the glow of the honor wall. They followed Raina on her daily routine, her steps deliberate, her scars unhidden. Caleb sat in the corner booth, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, always present. He was the grounding voice, the witness to her transformation. During one interview, Lena asked, Raina, what do your scars mean to you now? Raina looked down at her arms, tracing the jagged patterns with her fingertips. She didn't rush her answer. They mean I survived. They mean I carried men through fire when I thought my body would give out. They mean the worst thing that happened to me didn't end me, Joe. My scars don't make me less. They make me undeniable. Lena didn't speak. The silence was enough. The camera rolled, capturing every word, every pause, every flicker of light across her skin. The clip spread before the series even aired. Subtitled in multiple languages, it was shared across platforms, reaching millions. Survivors of burns, veterans of war, victims of workplace discrimination, all found themselves in her words. Meanwhile, Travis disappeared. He sold his properties quietly, retreated from public life, and vanished from the headlines. His collapse wasn't explosive, it was hollow, a slow unraveling of a man who had built his life on arrogance and cruelty. But Raina's rise was not about his fall. The diner remained her center, her ground. She still poured coffee, still greeted customers, still wiped counters at the end of the night. The honor wall stretched wider, nearly covering the length of the diner, glowing with stories, medals, photos, and names that would never be erased. Caleb once teased, "You realize people are flying across the country just to watch you pour coffee?" Raina smirked faintly. Then I'd better not spill. But she knew it wasn't the coffee they came for. It was the truth. The final episode of The Weight We Carry aired on a quiet Sunday evening. Families gathered in living rooms, veterans in bars, survivors in shelters. The series traced her journey from the silence of the diner to the thunder of the Senate chamber. In the closing scene, Raina stood before the honor wall, her scars visible, her hand pressed to a photo of her younger self in uniform. Her voiceover carried softly. We carry the weight because someone must. We carry it because silence is heavier. But when we carry it together, it becomes strength. The screen faded to black. The next morning, the diner door jingled nonstop. Strangers brought flowers. Children carried drawings. Veterans saluted as they entered. Donations poured in for new programs supporting transition and healing. Raina Jefferson, once mocked as nothing more than burnt skin and silence, had become a voice echoed across the world. And though her journey had begun with humiliation at Table 7, it ended with something far greater. A legacy built not on scars alone, but on the unshakable truth that those scars carried. Late that night, Caleb sat across from her, both of them exhausted from the endless crowd. You know what you did? He asked. She tilted her head, weary but calm. What's that? You turned survival into a movement. Raina took a long sip of coffee, then set the cup down with a steady hand. No, she said softly. We did. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. The Honor Diner no longer belonged to a single town. It had become a landmark, a living monument to survival and solidarity. On any given day, license plates from across the country filled the parking lot. People came not just for food, but for healing, for memory, for belonging. Inside, the air carried a different rhythm. Veterans shared booths with civilians, strangers with strangers, all bound by unspoken understanding. The hum of conversation was steady, not tense, but purposeful. It felt less like a diner and more like a sanctuary. Raina Jefferson still moved behind the counter, apron tied, coffee pot in hand. Some people wondered why she still worked shifts when she could have easily left, taken speaking tours, or lived off donations. But she refused to abandon the role that grounded her. "Coffee's ready," she would say, pouring with the same precision as always. And when people looked into her eyes, they realized it wasn't about the coffee at all. It was about being seen. The diner had expanded its mission. What began as the honor wall, a mosaic of photos, medals, and memories, now stretched across nearly every surface. The walls told stories: black and white portraits from Korea, Polaroids from Iraq, hand-drawn sketches from children who had never seen war but lived with its echoes through their families. Every morning, Raina paused in front of the wall, her hand brushed lightly across frames as if in silent roll call. "Present," she would whisper, barely audible, acknowledging each face. Workshops soon filled the back booths. A therapist volunteered evenings to lead group sessions for veterans battling nightmares. Local teachers brought in students for history from the wall, letting them learn not from textbooks, but from stories told by the very people who had lived them. Resume clinics and job fairs were organized on Saturdays, veterans helping veterans find work beyond uniforms. Caleb Hartman took on much of the logistics. He built spreadsheets, scheduled volunteers, coordinated with nonprofits. He didn't crave the spotlight, but his quiet efficiency kept the movement alive. Where Raina anchored hearts, Caleb anchored operations. "Without you, this place would drown in chaos," Raina told him one night as they sorted through donation envelopes. Caleb shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Without you, this place wouldn't exist." Recognition spread. State officials declared the street outside Veterans Row. Signs marked the block, but what mattered more were the people who walked it. Local businesses painted murals of service members. Store owners offered discounts to veterans, and families brought meals for those who had none. One morning, Raina stepped outside to find an entire mural being painted across the diner's brick wall. The artist, a young woman whose brother had served, worked with swift, sure strokes. Slowly, a portrait of Raina emerged. Scars visible, eyes forward, posture unbroken. She stood in silence as the image took form, watching herself become more than flesh, more than wounds. She had become symbol. When the mural was finished, a crowd gathered. Veterans saluted, children clapped, and Miguel hung a small plaque beneath it. Strength and stillness. Raina's throat tightened as she read the words. For years, her stillness had been mistaken for weakness. Now it was recognized as power. The media continued to follow her, but she answered only when it mattered. She accepted invitations to speak at universities, nonprofits, and military bases, always returning to the diner afterward. She didn't want stages. She wanted stools, counters, tables where stories spilled easier than speeches. At one event, she was introduced as a national hero. She stepped to the microphone and shook her head. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I'm a waitress who refused to disappear. I'm a medic who did her job. If that makes me something more in your eyes, then let it also remind you, there are thousands like me who go unseen. Start by believing them." Her words rippled, carried on airwaves and podcasts, translated into other languages. Back at the diner, she remained unchanged. She tied her apron, poured coffee, listened more than she spoke. But the walls around her, the people at the tables, testified to the movement she had built. One evening, as twilight settled, Raina sat alone at the counter after closing. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting blue light across the empty booths. Caleb came in from the back, wiping his hands on a towel. "Tired?" he asked. "Always," she said softly. Then after a pause, "But not defeated." He leaned against the counter. "You know, they renamed the block. You've got murals, workshops, policies being drafted because of your testimony. You've built a legacy." Raina traced the rim of her coffee cup, her gaze drifting toward the honor wall. "It's not mine," she murmured. "It's ours." She rose, walking to the wall. Her hand pressed against a photo of a young soldier smiling in desert sun, long gone, but not forgotten. Her voice was steady, a whisper only Caleb could hear. It's not just me, it's us. And in that moment she understood. Her story had moved from survival to legacy, a legacy stitched into walls, carried by veterans and children, built not on one woman's scars but on a community's strength. The diner would remain, the wall would grow, and long after she was gone, the lesson would endure. Stillness is not silence, it is power. The letter came not by email, not by courier, but by hand, delivered in a crisp envelope with the White House seal pressed in gold. Miguel found it tucked beneath the diner's front door one early morning, still chilled by the night air. When Raina Jefferson opened it, her hands trembled just slightly. The words inside were direct. You are invited to the White House in recognition of your courage and service, both in combat and in civilian life. For a long moment, she said nothing. Caleb watched her from across the booth, coffee cups steaming between them. Well, he asked. She exhaled, folding the letter carefully. I don't belong in palaces, she said. You don't belong in silence either, Caleb replied. A week later, Raina found herself walking through the iron gates of the White House, the press buzzing like a swarm of bees on the other side. Her navy suit fit clean, her hair tied back, her scars uncovered. She had refused makeup again. This was her truth, and she would not mask it. Inside, chandeliers glittered, polished floors reflected marble walls, and staffers moved briskly with clipboards in hand. Raina walked steady, her boots clicking against centuries of history. Caleb walked at her side, his posture relaxed but his presence like a shield. The East Room was filled with guests, veterans, activists, lawmakers, and journalists. Cameras pointed forward, microphones perched on stands, red lights glowing. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, the applause rolling like a tide. The president, solemn and steady, stood beside her. He spoke first. Today, we honor not only a soldier, but a survivor, not only a medic, but a leader. Raina Jefferson has shown us that scars are not shame, but testimony, that silence is not weakness, but waiting for the right moment to speak. For her courage, on and off the battlefield, we award her the Medal of Civil Honor. The medal was placed around her neck, its ribbon brushing against scars that had once been ridiculed. She did not cry, she did not bow. She simply stood, shoulders squared, gaze forward. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped to the microphone. I don't stand here because I wanted this, she began, her voice calm but resonant. I stand here because I was mocked until silence broke. I stand here because too many of us were erased and someone had to say no more. She paused, scanning the room, her eyes lingering on veterans seated in the front row. This medal isn't mine alone. It belongs to every soldier who came home invisible. It belongs to every worker discarded for scars you can see and scars you can't. If you want to honor me, then honor them. By listening, by believing, by refusing to erase us again. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. For the first time, the story was hers to tell back in Texas. The diner window displayed the medal in a simple wooden frame. Caleb placed it there himself, right above the honor wall, where sunlight could catch on its polished surface each morning. Raina stood beside him, arms folded. It feels strange, she admitted, like it belongs to everyone but me. That's because it does, Caleb said. She gave a small nod. Good, then it's in the right place. The recognition only widened her reach. Invitations poured in from schools, community centers, veterans groups. She accepted selectively, careful to balance visibility with presence. One morning she spoke at a local high school. The gymnasium was filled with students, the bleachers creaking under the weight of restless bodies. She stood at the podium, sleeves rolled back, scars visible. Strength isn't the absence of wounds, she told them. It's the proof you carried them and kept walking. Afterward, a boy approached her with trembling hands. He pulled back his hoodie sleeve to reveal thin lines across his arm. They make fun of me, he whispered. Raina placed her hand gently on his shoulder. They don't get to define you. You do. And you're still here. That's your strength. The boy nodded, tears in his eyes. For him, the lesson was not abstract. It was survival. From these talks, a curriculum began to take shape. With Caleb's organization and Lena's storytelling expertise, they built a program called Scars and Stories. It blended history, testimony, and practical tools for resilience. Schools adopted it, nonprofits spread it, and soon it reached its classrooms nationwide. Workshops taught students about trauma recovery, empathy, and the value of listening. Veterans visited schools to share their experiences, breaking down the silence between generations. Raina didn't call herself a teacher, but the role came naturally. She didn't lecture, she shared. And in her scars, students found lessons no textbook could match. The diner remained her anchor. No matter where she spoke, she returned each week to pour coffee, wipe counters, and sit in the booth beneath the honor wall. Regulars never let her pay for her own meal. Newcomers often left tokens, a patch, a note, a photo for the wall. Late one evening, after a long day of speeches and travel, she sat with Caleb at the counter. "You realize," he said, stirring his coffee, "you've become more than a survivor. You're a teacher now, a leader." Raina smiled faintly, her eyes soft. "I never set out to be anything. I just wanted to be seen." "And now," Caleb said, tapping the metal's reflection in the window, "you've made sure no one else disappears." She looked out at the neon glow of the sign, the shadow of the mural on the wall, the quiet hum of the honor diner at night. Her life, once narrowed to survival, had expanded into something greater. She had carried scars into power, not by seeking it, but by embodying it. And in that stillness, she realized, this was no longer just her story. It was the nation's. The diner was quieter now. Evening light spilled through the windows, soft and golden, stretching shadows across the honor wall. Raina Jefferson moved slowly along the wall, fingertips brushing frames, lips murmuring names as though she were calling roll. The world outside had changed. Policies were being debated in Congress. Workplaces across the country were revising codes and practices. Scars and Stories had been adopted by schools in 20 states. Her testimony still echoed in media headlines, her face painted on murals from Texas to New York. But inside the diner, life moved at its own steady pace. Coffee steamed, plates clattered, forks scraped, and the bell above the door rang as it always had. One afternoon, Miguel carried in the mail. Among bills and donations was a single envelope with no return address. Raina opened it carefully. Inside was a photo, grainy, worn at the edges. A soldier grinned at the camera, sand behind him, rifle slung across his chest. On the back, written in shaky ink, "You saved me, thank you. James Wright." Her breath caught. The name slammed against memory. James, the young private who had nearly bled out in Fallujah, whom she had dragged through fire when she thought her legs would collapse. She had never known if he survived. And now, years later, he had found her. 2 weeks later, the diner door swung open and a man stepped inside. Older now, hair streaked with gray, a slight limp in his stride, but his eyes were the same. "Raina?" he asked, voice breaking. She froze, coffee pot in hand. "James?" They crossed the diner in seconds, embracing tightly. Around them, patrons hushed, watching the reunion with reverence. Caleb stood back, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. James pulled away, his eyes wet. "I thought you died that night." "I thought you did," Raina whispered. They laughed then, shaky, unsteady, but alive. At a corner booth, they sat for hours, trading memories, some painful, some absurd, some unfinished stories finally given closure. James showed her photos of his family, children she never knew existed, a life built on the survival she had given him. "You carried me out of fire," he said quietly. "I've carried that moment every day since. I just wanted you to know I lived. Because of you, I lived." Her throat tightened, tears sliding freely. For once, she did not hide them. The docuseries The Weight We Carry released its final episode worldwide. It chronicled everything: the diner, the honor wall, the Senate testimony, the White House medal, the mural painted in her likeness. But the closing scene was simple. Raina pouring coffee, scars visible, smile faint but real. Viewers around the globe wept. Donations surged to veteran programs. New nonprofits launched. Laws began to shift. And in shelters, schools, and community halls, people whispered her name not as a waitress, not as a victim, but as proof that scars could change nations. Months later, reforms were announced. Corporations faced penalties for discriminatory coding and firings. New protections for veterans entered law. Training programs were funded. Mental health services expanded. The ripple of her defiance had become a wave reshaping policy. Still, Raina remained in the diner. The honor wall grew daily, expanding beyond frames to entire panels of memory. Miguel joked they'd need a second location just to hold it all. Caleb suggested digitizing the archive, and volunteers rushed to help. Children visited with class trips, pressing small hands against the photos, whispering questions their teachers encouraged them to ask. Raina always answered with patience, her stillness steadying even the youngest voices. One evening after the rush had cleared, Raina sat at the counter with Caleb. The diner hummed softly, neon light casting its familiar blue glow. "You've built something that'll outlast us all," Caleb said, gesturing to the honor wall. Raina sipped her coffee, her gaze distant but warm. "I didn't build it alone. They built it with me." He nodded, watching her in silence for a moment. "You've carried fire your whole life, but now you're carrying light." She smiled faintly. "There's no difference. Fire destroys, light reveals. It's what you do with it that matters." They sat in companionable quiet, the hum of the diner their music. Outside, the mural glowed under streetlights, her likeness larger than life, scars visible. Eyes forward, words painted beneath. Strength and stillness. Patrons passing by paused to take photos, some pressing hands to the wall in quiet tribute. Veterans saluted, children smiled, families stood in reverence. Inside, Raina closed the diner for the night. She pressed her palm gently to the mural through the ghostans, whispering words only she could hear. "It's not just me, it's us." And so her story ended where it began, not in fire, not in silence, but in a diner filled with truth. Raina Jefferson, once mocked as nothing more than scars, had become a leader, a teacher, a legacy. She was proof that survival could bloom into strength, that silence could shatter into justice, that scars could become banners. Her battlefield was no longer Fallujah. It was here on American soil, at a counter where coffee steamed and stories lived. The war she had fought was never just hers. It was everyone's. And because she stood, countless others would never again be erased. Strength in stillness. That was her legacy.